The announcement came without warning, shattering the morning calm across the nation. Newsrooms scrambled, anchors struggled to keep up, and social media erupted in confusion and disbelief. Alaska, the vast and wild northern frontier, was suddenly at the center of a global crisis. Alaska was to be locked down immediately and completely. The order was absolute: no one in, no one out. The state's borders, stretching across thousands of miles of rugged wilderness, were now lines that could not be crossed. U.S. Northern Command invoked emergency protocols, cutting Alaska off from the world and placing it under direct military control. The decision was swift, coordinated, and left no room for negotiation or delay. Airspace closed, maritime borders blockaded, and land routes sealed. Alaska became a fortress overnight. Every entry point was guarded, every route monitored, as if the state itself had become a military outpost on the edge of the unknown. Nearly 730,000 residents found their world transformed in hours, isolation now enforced by the government, streets emptied, families huddled indoors, and a heavy silence settled over towns and cities that once thrived on connection to the outside world. Officials cited a credible threat from the Arctic but refused to share details, fueling anxiety and wild speculation. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was it an environmental disaster, a military provocation, or something even stranger? Was it a foreign incursion, espionage, or a new weapon? Theories multiplied, each more alarming than the last, as the true nature of the threat remained hidden behind layers of secrecy. No answers came, only silence and fear. The uncertainty was suffocating, leaving Alaskans and the rest of the country to wonder what danger lurked beyond the horizon. For the first time, an entire state was quarantined by military order, not disease. The scale of the operation was unprecedented, a show of force and resolve that stunned even seasoned observers. The move marked a dramatic shift in national security, prioritizing Alaska's defense above all else. The Pentagon's focus shifted north, and the world took notice. The message to the world was clear: the U.S. saw the Arctic as a grave danger and would act decisively. Allies and rivals alike watched for the next move, uncertain how far America would go to protect its northernmost state. The sealing of Alaska was more than defense. It was a declaration that a new era of confrontation had begun. The icy expanse was now a front line, and the world's attention was fixed on what would happen next. The world watched, stunned, as America drew a line in the ice, one that would not be crossed without consequence. In Washington, the Pentagon raised the nation's alert to DEFCON 3, the highest level of military readiness since the Cold War, a move not taken lightly. The gravity of the situation was unmistakable, as the world watched America's response to the Arctic crisis unfold in real time. The U.S. military braced for possible conflict, mobilizing troops and resources at a pace not seen in decades. The message was clear. The Arctic threat was not just a distant possibility, but an existential danger demanding immediate action. The White House Situation Room became the nerve center of the crisis, with the president and top advisors locked in a series of urgent emergency briefings. Every decision carried enormous weight, as leaders weighed the risks and consequences of each move. Intelligence and military leaders cycled through the Situation Room, focused on managing the nationwide lockdown and neutralizing the threat. Their expertise and coordination were critical as the nation faced a challenge unlike any in recent memory. Across America, anxiety soared as citizens awaited updates, glued to their screens and radios. The uncertainty was palpable, with families and communities coming together in hope and fear, searching for reassurance in a time of crisis. In Alaska, martial law took hold almost overnight. The state's vast wilderness and strategic position made it the front line, and the presence of military vehicles and checkpoints became a new reality for residents. Military authority overrode civilian government, with National Guard and state troopers enforcing strict controls. Curfews were imposed, and movement was tightly regulated to ensure security and maintain order. Democratic processes were suspended for command and control. City halls and government offices stood empty, their doors locked under military orders, as civilian leadership stepped aside for the sake of national security. Military bases like Elmendorf-Richardson and Fort Wainwright became fortresses, their gates sealed and security at maximum. Inside, soldiers prepared for any contingency, ready to defend the nation's northernmost frontier. The Navy surged warships to Alaska's coasts, forming a steel curtain at sea. The sight of powerful vessels patrolling icy waters sent a clear signal: America's resolve would not waver. Overhead, satellites and drones watched the Arctic with relentless focus, gathering intelligence and tracking every movement. The skies buzzed with activity, as technology became the eyes and ears of the nation. The message was unmistakable. America was on guard, its armed forces at the highest state of readiness, prepared to respond to any threat at a moment's notice. The nation held its breath, bracing for what might come next. In living rooms and city streets, Americans waited, united by uncertainty and hope, as history unfolded before their eyes. Alaska's transportation system shut down instantly. No flights, no ships, no road traffic in or out. Airports emptied, ports blockaded, and the Alaska Highway became a militarized barrier. Residents were ordered indoors, daily life suspended as communities turned eerily silent. Supply chains collapsed, store shelves emptied, and isolated villages faced shortages of food, medicine, and fuel. Communication with the outside world was restricted, especially near military sites. Internet and phone access were monitored or cut, deepening the sense of isolation. Families were cut off, information limited to official broadcasts. The psychological toll grew: anxiety, uncertainty, and the constant presence of armed patrols. Curfews and stay-at-home orders were strictly enforced in cities. Alaska's famed individualism was tested as freedoms vanished overnight. The state's vast wilderness became a cage. The world outside felt impossibly far away. The sudden lockdown sent shockwaves across the globe, instantly turning Alaska into a flashpoint for international concern. News outlets from Tokyo to London broke into regular programming, and social media erupted with speculation and fear. Governments scrambled to assess the situation as uncertainty gripped the world. Russia condemned the move as dangerously provocative, accusing the US of destabilizing the region. In a show of force, Moscow launched large-scale military drills near the Arctic, deploying troops and warships to signal its readiness to defend its interests. China, with its growing Arctic ambitions, urged restraint and demanded full transparency from Washington. Chinese officials voiced concern that the crisis could threaten vital trade routes and energy projects, and called for calm dialogue to prevent escalation. In Beijing, analysts saw the lockdown as a calculated attempt by the US to contain China's influence in the Arctic, raising fears of a new front in the ongoing rivalry between the two powers. NATO allies quickly issued statements of public support for the United States, but behind closed doors, many leaders expressed deep unease about the lack of information and the potential for unintended consequences. The alliance found itself in a difficult position, asked to back a major action with few details, and worried about being drawn into a conflict in the high north. Emergency meetings erupted at the United Nations and the Arctic Council. Diplomats from around the world scrambled to de-escalate the crisis, seeking ways to open lines of communication and prevent a wider confrontation. Political analysts called this the first major crisis of a new era, one defined by great power competition in the rapidly changing Arctic, where climate change and geopolitics now collide. Melting ice was opening not just new shipping lanes but also reigniting old rivalries and territorial disputes, as nations vied for control over resources and strategic routes. Around the world, people watched anxiously, glued to their screens, wondering if the standoff would remain a cold confrontation or suddenly ignite into something far more dangerous. For now, Alaska stood at the center of global tension, a symbol of uncertainty in a world on edge. Alaska is more than a state. It's America's northern shield. Its geography puts it at the crossroads of continents and oceans, sharing a border with Russia. The state hosts advanced fighter jets, elite troops, and key military bases, making it a launchpad for US power. Alaska's radar systems are vital for early missile warning, protecting the nation from northern threats. The Aleutian Islands act as natural barriers and surveillance platforms, controlling access to critical shipping lanes. Disrupting this network would blind and expose the US to attack. The lockdown was a direct response to protect these assets. Any threat to Alaska is a threat to the American homeland. The state's defense infrastructure is irreplaceable. Sealing Alaska was about safeguarding the nation's front line. The lockdown shattered Alaska's economy overnight, leaving it in disarray. Oil exports halted, crippling state revenue and shaking global energy markets worldwide. Fishing stopped, silencing one of the world's richest fisheries and devastating coastal communities deeply. Tourism vanished, with flights grounded and cruise ships diverted. Summer income lost entirely. Small businesses faced ruin as supply chains broke and costs soared uncontrollably. Residents struggled to afford basic goods, with shortages everywhere causing panic. The state's reliance on outside connections was exposed dramatically. Economic collapse followed the security crisis, leaving deep scars and uncertainty. Recovery would take years if it came at all, leaving many in doubt. The lockdown raised urgent and troubling questions about civil liberties versus security. Martial law, movement restrictions, and communication controls alarmed legal experts and rights groups nationwide. The ACLU warned of a dangerous precedent, an entire state's rights suspended by executive order alone. Critics argued the government had overstepped constitutional bounds, confining citizens without due process or recourse. Monitoring communications and limiting speech echoed authoritarian tactics from history. The public was left with only official narratives, unable to question or openly protest. The crisis forced America to confront how much freedom it would truly trade for safety. The legal and moral debates would echo long after the immediate threat was gone. The Alaska lockdown has changed the Arctic and America forever. The region is now a central stage for global power struggles, no longer a remote afterthought. Melting ice has created new opportunities and new dangers, making the Arctic a military flashpoint. The crisis exposed both U.S. strengths and vulnerabilities, demanding a new Arctic strategy. Future lockdowns may become a tool of national security with civil liberties at risk. The precedent is set, entire regions can be isolated in an instant. The peace of the polar north can no longer be taken for granted. The Arctic's future will be shaped by competition and cooperation, its fate now tied to global security. Alaska's ordeal is a warning. The world's last frontiers are no longer safe from conflict.